If one were to lock me in a room and ask me on the spot, what game developer do I respect the most, I'd probably say Hideki Kamiya. If he hadn't blocked me on Twitter, which is why for today's poorly written opening gag, I will be saying Tetsuya Nomura. However, once we reach maybe 5th or 6th place, you'll find Yuji Naka sitting in his little creative bubble with tiny winged kids, his fast cars, giant fucking chickens, and his kids that he loves very much. And while I may respect him a lot, the general gaming industry has treated him like shit ever since he left Sonic Team and started his indie studio Probe. And there is no evidence more damning to this thought than Rodea the Sky Soldier, the final Nintendo Wii game. That's not shovelware.
Here we go!
So back in 2010, I remember I was at my local library reading Nintendo Power that had an article about a soon-to-release game by the creator of Sonic the Hedgehog. And what I recall my thought process being was something along the lines of, wow, this game with the penguin looks really cool! Because I was 12 at the time and my memories are kind of fucking weak. I have no clue where the penguin memory came from, probably something else in the same magazine, but either way, I wasn't that hyped because I was still caught up in the hype for the soon-to-come stateside Final Fantasy XIII, and I was constantly checking the Sonic 4 Episode 1 website to learn about how Eggman has a smaller robot budget. Then after this Nintendo Power article, I didn't read anything about the game, nor did I think about it until 2015, when Yuji Naka himself started posting on Facebook about how I should play the classic Wii version of the game once it releases, as it's the intended play method. Rodea released in November of 2015, which was when I was very much deep into the dark degeneracy void that is Hyperdimension Neptunia. So I decided it released at a good time for me to take a break between Mach 2 and Victory to play something that would be familiar to my tastes of youth. And that's why today I'm going to tell the story Kadokawa Corporation wouldn't tell you, the tragedy of Rodea the Sky Soldier. God, that was probably my worst fucking joke yet. But before then, let's roll back to 2006, when Yuji Naka left Sega. So, by this point, Sonic Team had been helmed mostly by Yuji Naka for 15 years, and going back an extra few years, Sega had a large restructuring that heavily affected Sonic Team a little bit after Sonic Heroes released. This led to Sonic Team not being commissioned to develop many games outside of what Sega considered Sonic Team's franchises, which really consisted of Sonic and Puyo Puyo. They did also make one more Knights and Phantasy Star game, but those were slightly after Naka left, so they're outside of this little boundary. This was far different from the previous decade, where Sonic Team had been allowed to branch out to create experimental and cherished games like Knights, Burning Rangers, Phantasy Star Online, Choo Choo Rocket, Billy Hatcher, and Samba de Amigo. So, midway into development of Sonic's big leap into HD systems with 06, Naka decided to start his own indie studio called Probe, and a few Sonic Team employees followed. This caused massive issues for Sonic Team, but that is not today's story. As far as Probe went, they started out really small. Most of Probe's library are mobile games, and for the most part, it seems as though they were more so made to keep the lights on while they worked on their big put us on the map project, Rodea the Sky Soldier, which was completed by Probe in 2011 for the Nintendo Wii and was one of the greatest games for the console. But, as I said, this story do be a tragedy, so let's get into that part. Rodea's publisher was Kadokawa Games, a subsidiary of a much larger, much older company that was in the middle of far too many structural changes at the time for me to go into. What this essentially meant, though, was that Probe and Rodea were very low on the company's list of priorities, which was a problem because Kadokawa wanted to develop a Nintendo 3DS version of the game to release on the same day as the Wii version. This meant that Yuji Naka and his team had a completely finished game that they just had to sit on until the publisher was ready to release it. And since that meant Probe wasn't seeing their financial returns on Rodea, they had to make even more games during the interim. There was a fishing game, some more mobile games, and 2 licensed Digimon games that I heard were alright. And then in an interview in 2013, Kadokawa stated the 3DS version was only 70% complete. And at this point, the Wii U was already a year old. So Kadokawa decided that the Wii version of the game, Yuji Naka and his team's original idea and vision, would not be released by itself. Instead, it was marketed as a bonus feature of first print runs of the Wii U version of the game, which was a port of the 3DS version. And both of these versions were so bad that Yuji Naka consistently wrote on Facebook at the time of the game's release, "Hey, yeah, just play the Wii version. That's the good one." Okay, thanks, bye. His pleas did fall mostly in vain, because Katakawa were much more interested in marketing the very shoddy, very much not a good game Wii U version of Rodea. Because of this, you'll notice that most professional reviews go somewhere along the lines of, one of the worst games of 2015. These graphics are washed out and bland. Was there a flight meter in a flying game? All caused because people ignored the Wii version of the game, which we will be getting into right now.
I will uphold the promise engraved on my heart. I will protect Garuda. Princess Cecilia, please be safe.
The story of Rodea begins in the middle of a war between the kingdom of Garuda and a nation of robots called the Naga Empire. You play as a robot known as Rodea that's betrayed the Naga Empire and works for Princess Cecilia. During the prologue, Rodea needs to save Princess Cecilia after a ship has been shot down by the Naga Empire. But before you save her, this is the part when the game gives you your tutorial. Alright, so Rodea is a pretty tricky game. Now be ready. I'm only going to go over this once. I mean, you can rewind, but I'm only going to go over this once, so pay attention. Don't miss any of it. Okay? We good? Alright, so here's what happens. You take the Wii remote, you point the crosshair like a light gun wherever you want to go, and then you press the B button and you get flung there really fast. And that's it! That is the main gameplay function of Rodea. Now you can also hold A to turn your flight into what is essentially the homing attack from Sonic. And you can also add a curve to your flight path if you swing left, right, up, or down. But that is the essential way to play the game. And there is a little bit more, mainly in terms of power-ups that are introduced later. But for pacing reasons, I'm just going to talk about them now. First is this green hang glider looking thing that powers Rodea up. The best comparison for this would be Mario, because at the start, Rodea has 2 hits, but when he finds his hang glider, he gets an extra 3rd hit, and he does more damage. However, when you're down to 1 hit left, Rodea becomes extremely wimpy. He can only fly a really short distance, and he can't attack enemies. When this happens, you need to power up as fast as fucking possible. Luckily, a hang glider is typically close by at any areas where you can get hurt, so it's not really something to worry about. The difficulty curve throughout the game is also fair enough, where players 13 and up shouldn't really have much of an issue with reverting to the 1-hit form. Rodea's second power-up is the machine gun, which gives Rodea a gun. Tap A and you shoot the gun. It can overheat, so you can't use it forever, but there's more times when you use it for puzzles than actual combat, so the overheating doesn't become an issue at any point. The next power-up is the running shoes, which act similar to the dash panels from the Sonic series. For the most part, you're supposed to use them on designated dash panels that will send you flying until the meter runs out. But you're also supposed to be able to start a dash yourself after boosting into a wall or the floor, but I find this to be inconsistent, or at least my first playthrough. Upon my replay for this video, I got the hang of it a little bit better, so it might just take a while to understand. Rodea's final power-up is the scatter that lets him lock onto multiple enemies at once, and then, when he starts flying, he just homing attacks into all of them one after the other. The entire power-up system is very Mario-esque, and it works great for a game that mainly focuses on its main core idea, which is flying. The biggest downside to this game's control scheme is the camera. Instead of having a second stick to control the camera, or any kind of button, you have to use the pointer to pan over to the other direction. And a more minimal problem, but an issue nonetheless, is how Rodea walks on the ground. Since Rodea doesn't support the nunchuck, you have to use the Wii Remote D-pad to walk, and it's really sluggish. Although, I'm also a little tempted to call this a good decision, because if you're playing the game well, then you shouldn't be touching the ground at all. So this could be considered a punishment for playing poorly.
Go for it.
Back to the story. Once the tutorial is over, Rodea finds Princess Cecilia and they're both cornered by the Naga Empire. This leads Cecilia to give Rodea the key of time and teleports him to a far-off desert, since Rodea doesn't like sand.
It's coarse and rough and irritating.
He punches the ground and his arm blows up, putting his system into sleep mode. Then, Cut 1,000 years later, when this mechanic girl, Ion, wakes him up and he has amnesia. This is where the game truly begins, and good God is it liberating. The game quits holding your hand and just lets you go where you want to go. The only time you're ever stopped is for cutscenes or to introduce the more confusing new concepts or the power-ups I've already mentioned. And then, once you reach the middle of the first stage, it's revealed that now that it's been 1,000 years, the Neo-Naga Empire shows up to invade the land, and it's up to Rodea to stop it. And then it's at this point that the story pacing of the game comes to a very halting stop, because now it's just achieving very minor ways to stop the enemy or helping one of Ion's friends. And every story beat from here is clearly just to get you to the next stage. And in all fairness, I do think the world of Garuda is a very coherent and interesting world, but my interest in it comes less from who and what we find, but more from what we don't. The world of Rodea feels very dreamlike. My main comparison when I originally played the game was Klonoa, but now that Made in Abyss is a thing, I believe that would be a more apt, if not darker, comparison. Returning to the mystery aspect, I think that's when it's important to bring up what Yuji Naka considers a perfect game, Nights into Dreams. So, the world of Nightopia was very much a dreamlike mystery that did not pose even the idea of an answer. Rodea isn't as hardcore at leaving a mystery to be a mystery as Nights is, and its writing would probably be better a comparison to the Sonic Adventure games. However, there are other Nightsian ideas, such as the focus on flight, a main villain who looks a lot like Wise Man, and boss battles that are somewhat reminiscent of the Reala fight, and these 2D bonus levels that are really just Nights with pointer controls. I'm not going to call Rodea a spiritual successor to Nights like many speculated before release, because what I just stated is where the similarities end. Gameplay wise, it is a bit closer to Sonic than Nights, but I also feel as though saying this comment undersells just how unique a game Rodea is. There really is nothing like Rodea, and it's amazing that it used the Wii's pointer functionality in a way no one else had. Getting to a design choice Rodea does different from Nights, Sonic, Billy Hatcher, and really just any Sonic Team game with a ranking system, is how it handles the rank. Instead of putting together your time and score and then giving you a composite rank that factors both, you have a separate time and score rank. This design choice causes the player to require more than one playthrough if they want all S ranks, because it's next to impossible to get a good score rank on the same run you get a good time rank. And the requisite for the S rank is so fucking strict. So memorization of the stage and the decision of if you're doing score or time is important from the beginning. And it doesn't feel like padding with the way it does it. It's more like how Yuji Naka always wants to go back to that arcadey feeling that he has in his games. You can also find medals across the stages, but in the Wii version of the game, collecting them only gets you a sexy Rodea costume, which I haven't done, so here's a picture. The Wii U version actually has an upgrade system that you use the medals for, but the upgrades are just the power-ups you find in the levels of the Wii version, so it was essentially Kadokawa trying to make use of something by expanding on a concept they already butchered. But the point I'm trying to make is that Rodea's stages are designed to cater to both the players who want to go fast and the players who want to take their time exploring the world to find everything. But it's done in a way that doesn't force you to sacrifice one for the other, although debatably you'd lose time if you're a completionist to get all the S ranks. If you're like me, then you probably think of Sonic Team's music to be their one consistent quality, whether that be the hard rock and positive attitude of the Sonic games, the dreamy ambiance of Nights, the fiesta energy, Latin American, though mostly licensed, tracks of Samba de Amigo, or the Coke on Tits party that is the Billy Hatcher soundtrack. And sadly, it's pretty clear that in the founding of Prope, none of the composers from Sonic Team or Sega decided to follow Yuji Naka. And honestly, from a feed family make art perspective, I can understand why they would stay with Sega when they've consistently been the most cherished artists of the lot. I'm not saying the music in Rodea is bad or anything, but it's not as distinctive as the music from Sonic Team titles. Takayuki Nakamura, known for his work on Virtua Fighter, Moonwalker, or the PS2 Phantom Blood game, isn't a bad composer. There are times when the music can enhance the exhilarating feeling of flying from landmass to landmass, such as the song in the first level and the one at the final stage. There are times, though, when the music does not add anything, or occasionally is detrimental to the mood, and that's completely and wholly during the boss fights. So there's two different boss fights in Rodea. There's flying battles against a bunch of other sky soldiers that are meant to be reminiscent of the fights against Reala or Shadow, and battles against giant colossuses of varying shapes that you need to find the weak points on. What makes it more disappointing is because the Sonic vs. Shadow theme from SA2 and the Knights vs. Reala theme make the atmosphere and emphasize the tension between the duelists that the gameplay couldn't. The lack of a tense or unique sound becomes increasingly prevalent on some fights that are ridiculously easy, such as this fight against Rylus. The Colossi battles are definitely more enjoyable from a gameplay standpoint, and the music does have more tension than the Robo battles, but it's not quite the epic grand scale you would expect from fighting a behemoth. And maybe I'm being a bit unfair. Perhaps they weren't trying for another The Perfect Album or a Multi-Dimensional. On its own, not compared to other Sonic Team titles, the soundtrack's pretty good. But if there is any part of the game that the soundtrack fails the immersion completely, it would definitely be the final boss, where Gyardo has transformed into a giant monster and the music here fucking sucks. Yeah, so I'm not gonna beat around the bush. The biggest problem in the entire fucking game is the song during the final boss. I know in the grander picture that means that this is a really good fucking game, but man, this song that plays here should not be a final boss track. I remember back in 2015 when I was playing for the first time, I got here and my brother just looked over at me and said, "This all looks cool, but why isn't Open Your Heart playing?" And so I played the final boss with Open Your Heart playing on my phone, and good god, that really fucking fixes it. Like, damn, I get that it's an indie studio, so maybe they couldn't get someone to do a rock song, but this final boss really feels like there should be a cheesy ass rock song here. The fight itself is creative. Compared to the other giant fights, you have to find tentacles with weak points that are spread apart, and then you'll be sucked up to attack more weak points. I remember pretty vividly having a hard time with them when I first played the game, but during my replay to get footage, I actually managed to S-rank them. Apparently it wasn't just me though, because this dude on the GameFAQs forums just straight up didn't like the final boss. That's Rodea for the Wii. One of the most hidden games that's main saving grace is that it's the last non-shovelware game on the Wii, so maybe every once in a while someone's curiosity will peak for it. Although, since the game was only sold with first print copies of the Wii U Rodea, everyone interested in playing Rodea for Wii will have to see this little abomination when they open the game case. But you know what? Let's take a crack at Rodea for Wii U. And no, fuck this. 3 stages into the game and I just cannot get myself to keep going. Controls are ass, there's a flight meter, the graphics are washed out, and the frame rate dips often because this is technically the 3DS version they ported. But the worst part, the very worst thing, flying requires you to jump, then press a prepare button, then aim, then make another button press to go. So you have to do 3 button presses to do what took 1 in the Wii version. Flying is no longer a fast-paced sense of freedom, it's an 8-hour cake recipe that kills all momentum. My entire interest in this version of the game is already gone. If there is anything better in the Wii U version of the game, I'm not going to be saying it, because this control scheme is too fucking horrendous to bear. It's no wonder Yuji Naka was so adamant about playing the Wii version. And you know what's even worse? In the credits of the Wii version of the game, most of the employees at Prope are just credited as Prope staff. Kadokawa Games, the dudes who fucked Prope and Naka over, had more names in the credits, and they did jack shit for the Wii version. If there is one thing I saw today that did lighten my mood a little though, is that a few of the reviews that rampantly attack Naka for the Wii version from 2015 have been taken down since then. which is good because Naka himself was clearly hoping for this game to be his big post-Sonic Team title, and a few corporate bigwigs ruined that chance, simply because they wanted to make a few dollars with a 3DS port that they clearly didn't actually care to make good. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. This didn't take me near as much time as some of the other videos I've done lately. I don't really have any funny thing to say about this video besides how, as you notice, there's a little skit where I couldn't get anyone to do it with me. But yeah, just click whatever I link. Y'all have a good one. Thank you so much for watching.